Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and there are a lot of boxes and trays that we can buy on the market, but sometimes we need a box or a tray for a particular item or to fit a particular spot. Well, they're very easy to make, and we can make them with no sewing. You are going to be able to choose the size of the bottom of the box and the sides. This could be a tray that's going to fit in a little area, or you can just make a tray that is something that you are going to enjoy using. So we're going to need a piece of paper, pencil, and a ruler to draw the pattern, some type of fabric, and I'm going to be using felt. You can get felt that has these different textures on it, and this is what I'm going to use. And I like the felt because I don't have to worry about finishing the edges. I will be using a medium weight fusible interfacing. So there's a fuse or that glue on one side, and it's stuck on a medium weight interfacing. And this particular one is called Structure, and it's from Fairfield. We can also add some trim, little lace, or the trim that has that little rope that's stuck onto that flat piece of fabric. And for this project, we do not need to do any sewing at all. We're going to glue everything together. So we're going to need a permanent glue that is going to work on fabric. And there's a few different ones out on the market. It needs to be permanent. If it gets damp or you need to wash it, a non-permanent glue will not hold up. So be sure to check and make sure that that glue is permanent and it's going to be good for fabric. From here, we get to draw our design. We need to start with that center measurement, whatever the bottom of that tray is going to be. In my case, I'm going to do it 4 inches by 7 inches. So that's the bottom size. Now we need to add on those sides. In my case, I'm going to do them 2.5 inches. So I need to add 2.5 inches all the way around. Follow that line and measure over 2.5 inches. That outside measurement needs to come right outside to those edges. So we can just redraw those lines. This is the bottom piece, and these are going to be our sides. Your sides will need to be equal. It won't matter what size they are. If you do 3 inches, you need to do 3 inches. 4 inches, so on. That way the sides are going to match together. These corners eventually are going to get cut out. But before we do that, we need to do a little flap so that it can glue on to the next side. So on one edge, we're going to draw a 1/2 inch seam. We only need 1 seam allowance per corner square. Because I'm using a felt that does not fray, this is going to be the entire pattern. We will not need to worry about finishing some edges. We will be able to cut out this pattern, cut along that seam allowance, and all the way around. So this corner is going to be removed. Cut that little seam apart so it looks like a flap. To keep these seam allowances out of view, we're going to trim off these little corners. You won't really even need to measure them. Just snip right to that corner. And do that to all 4 seams. I do want to make sure that my fabric will fit on. But before I do the trimming, I'm going to fuse on the medium weight interfacing. We need to fuse this onto the wrong side. So I'm going to take that glue side and press it on top of this felt. Cut your template out of both pieces of fabric. We do have 2 identical pieces. One's going to be a lining and one's going to be the outside. We're going to press this fabric right along that bottom measurement. So we'll have a press mark all the way along the bottom and press in those seam allowances. The outside fabric, the seams are going to have to be pressed all into the inside. For the inside lining, we're going to need to press it in the opposite directions because this piece needs to fit in, so the seams will need to go in the opposite direction. We now get to glue these seam allowances to the back of that flap. So they're going to sit like this. You can do one side at a time, match those edges, press that seam down, I want to make sure that the edge is straight, and then just put that iron tip in and press for a minute. The iron just speeds up the glue drying time. Once that one side is done, we're going to be able to continue and glue all of the sides together and do the outside box first. Be sure to let that glue dry really well before we try to add that lining in. Because felt is a little bit thick, the lining might feel a little tight, so we need to give it a little test. And we're going to do that before we glue those edges on. We will be able to trim off this little edge after, but we do want to make sure that that inside fits. If it's a little tight, we can trim just a little bit off, and it will really only need a very, very small sliver. I would start with doing 2 ends with that small sliver of fabric being trimmed off. And I really am only going to start with a very small sliver at a time. Now put this back in and see if it fits. It should be snug, but it shouldn't be pulling. And that's all I needed. Take the lining out, but now the seams are going to be on the outside. Once both pieces are good and dry, we can put them in and give them another test. Push that bottom in all the way and trim that edge. So just take a pair of scissors and trim. Once these edges are all matched up, we can add a bead of glue and put some clips to hold that down, or we can add some trim. To add some trim, it'll be easier if we do take that lining out, but we do want to make sure that the sides that we've cut are going to match. So just put a mark on the sides that are going to match. That way when we put it back in, we will know what side to put together. I will be adding trim along the outside of the bag. We could add this trim that looks like rope and has that little tape on the back, and we can glue that right on. You could also use lace. We just need to glue something right along this edge. And we're going to glue it all the way around so that we have the edges matching up. I'm going to hold the trim on with some clips until it dries. If you do not have one of these permanent fabric glues, you can also use a hot glue gun. We just need to keep those layers nice and thin. Let this dry. After I've matched up my marks and I've put that lining in, I want to make sure that those corners are nice and tight. Run that line of glue, and then we will need to let that dry. When the glue is dry, we are done. And we have a nice looking box or a tray, and we have it the size that we want. By pre-pressing these edges in, it gives it this box shape. If we did not press these edges first, it would be a little bit rounder along the bottom, which is fine too. It's just a different look. The trim does give it a nice finished look, so we did not get to see any of those raw edges. So with a little felt or wool and some trim, we can get a container for the size that we need. We can always put this together with a hot glue gun, or you can get a good strong glue that's going to dry permanent. Now I have that box exactly the size that I need. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're doing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.